Hello everyone, welcome back to part 2 of World Creation Environment Concept Art with 3D matte painting techniques. This is where we left in part 1. This is our base render from 3D, and we created a bunch of masks from it, as you can see here in red, green and blue, which are cool because they will help us later on in Photoshop as well. Then we got some atmospheric passes and an ambient occlusion pass, and all these render elements will really help us in the painting process later on. And as you can see, it's already pretty good looking. On the right side we have no texture at all. It's pretty much gray shaded, and also in the render we have some issues. Like you can see here, there are some of the rocks are showing up really white, so I'm quickly gonna select them and darken them down in the shadow area because they really popped in the renderer. So the first kind of step, if you want, so in the Photoshop process, in my kind of process, is to give texture to the pieces that have no texture at all. And obviously these geometry masks from the renderer help us a lot, because what I have to do basically is bring the texture into scale and into perspective, and then mask it with the to the according element, and then they will automatically fall into place. And then I usually play with the contrast and the brightness, and I'm also trying to play with the blend modes to get the desired result. And so I collected a few textures, some kind of a dead ivy texture here, which can be scaled down and works really well for these huge ivy vines, ivy branches. So in this first stage, we really want to focus on adding texture detail, detailing the scene where it needs, and instead of trying to alter the shapes too much and the colors and the lighting too much, because although I'm doing a few tweaks here, I'm trying not to change any outlines of the geometry, because from the moment we do that, our masks are useless, which is not a problem in the end, but because we need to texture so many things in this scene, that we need to be careful, because we don't want to spend a lot of time in Photoshop trying to lasso or magic won't select some of the areas. So I found this nice rock texture and really like the idea. So I'm putting it into place, blending it in where I want. And the only thing I really need to be careful in here, because I already rendered with atmosphere, is that I don't, that the texture is not too strong. It falls into place nicely, and it has it works with the existing light situation a lot. So obviously there are quite a few repeating processes now, because I'm using the same texture all over again, because these pillars are basically the same kind of idea. And you saw I collected a bunch of images I thought are appropriate for this kind of image. And I'm in theory very happy with what I got from the renderer. So what I really want to do now is break up the CG look, with random dirt, and just to make it more random basically. And this is a cool way to just throw some textures on top of it, set them to multiply, set them to overlay, set them to soft light, and copy them and just erase where you don't want to have them, and use the masks for blending them in. And you don't need to do a lot of color correction on them, especially if you put them into blending modes, because they will adapt the color of the scenery. And as you can see here now, I'm zooming in a lot, because I don't have to focus on the entire composition anymore, because that's done. That's established. My colors are established as well. I'm really looking now into detailing that scene. And what I'm doing right now is, with this dirt leak texture, I'm trying to establish some dirt trails on the side of the bridge, because it feels really still too new and too CG, too clean for my idea of this environment. And although this is, supposed to be kind of a style frame production painting concept art, I want to get this photoreal because I got a pretty photoreal light situation out of the renderer. So, and now I'm putting photorealistic textures on top of it. So the result will be kind of photorealistic anyway. And from time to time, of course, I'm flipping my image and mirroring it just to, get a new idea. And I quickly discovered that actually I have an area of ground showing up, which it wasn't intended because in theory, there should be no ground visible at all because this bridge is supposed to be, high, very high above ground. But so I'm quickly just darkening that area to make it less obvious. And I think I'm later gonna come back to that. As you see, I gathered a few rock textures that will help me also a bit of textures for vegetation, and did some research about jungle ruins I think in Vietnam. And there's this wall in the background which is really CG looking right now, and so I'm trying to add a few rock details in it right now. And there are a few problems, bright areas showing up. It's because of this GI interpolation, so I'm trying to generate a few masks to paint them out. And again, I'm really, really careful right now in this process that I'm not affecting the outline of the geometry, because I really want to use my maps as long as possible. And this will be really the next stage later on. So I'm using various textures to get a desired result. Obviously, I threw on a brick texture in the renderer, but it's these kind of textures work way better, and it's much more convenient throwing them on the image. As you see now, I found this really nice Gothic church arc, and I really thought this is really gonna look nice on the huge gate. Will add a lot of detail, because I actually never liked the geometry detail in the renderer. It felt way too low res, and so I'm now adjusting it and in size and making it work with the perspective, because that's what you really want to do. You have to make sure that your textures work in the perspective. From the moment they don't are in the perspective, they will break the illusion, and it will cause into problems. Also found this bark textures that are quite convenient to use on these ivy branches in the foreground. And although the foreground is quite dark, it's quite important that you have a decent amount of detail in this foreground area, because it's the closest thing to the camera, and as I mentioned, although it's dark, you want to make it look good, and you don't want somebody just look into some straight polygon, unshaded parts of the geometry here. So yeah, I'm generating various masks out of these, and now I'm just combining the foreground two masks to one mask, so I can isolate that pillar and the ivy, and get a bit of separation between foreground and midground, which should help from the composition, and it's a bit of a challenge not to overdo it. I think I'm going to go back to that later on, because again, I don't want to go too crazy now, because it will break the geometry masks. And also, I'm not only using textures, obviously, I'm also painting a few, trails by hand, because, obviously you're much faster, and it's, this kind of painting can be a lot of fun as well. So I'm mostly using, a round brush and a standard chalk brush for this kind of, matte painting techniques anyway. I'm not using a lot of custom brushes for this kind of stuff. Obviously, for applying the dirt like that, with painter, with brushes, it's good to have some, texture put into or some angle dynamics in these brushes, So I'm having a few of those, but I'm really not too crazy about brush sets in general. Also found this really nice jungle-looking tree bark. You really have to look for, if you go to, image hunting, you really have to look for, pieces you like, and are these going to be convenient in the process of making this image look photorealistic. And I'm now moving into the part where I start, enhancing the debris detail on the surface, because although we already scattered rocks and put on the ivy and scattered weaponry and stuff like that, it still feels way too empty and way too clean. So we're actually looking for this texture detail here a lot. And this is the area where we actually go away from pure texturing into more of a matte painting workflow, where we actually replace sections with textures, with images. So I found this image of a rock slide or rock avalanche. And I found it really cool because it actually has some diffuse lighting on it, not too strong light direction, so I can use it for this shadow area a lot. Because when you do this kind of stuff where you don't use images as a texture, use it as the images itself, always make sure that you have something that works with your light direction. And you see me from time to time increase the saturation or desaturate the entire image. I'm looking to make the values work, and then I'm focusing on the color. These are the two most important things in the process of matte painting, because you don't want to go too crazy on the highlights or on the shadows. So these elements really fall into place, and the colors come later. So obviously this element is flat lit as well. So what I do is I quickly create a mask for the rocks to bring them up a bit, because I have the CG rocks right next to it as a reference, and I see how strong the highlight is, so I know, okay, I need a bit of brighter highlight. So with a simple highlight mask, I can enhance that, and I use my mask to bring the ivy back on top, and this makes it blend very, very nice with the entire thing. Also use just some concrete textures to get some random color variation in the bridge here, and again use the same textures all the time again, because they work really good. And also what I'm trying to do is to break up shapes. You always want to focus on contrast instead of materials too much here, especially in a moody scene like that. And I don't like that super sharp line in the foreground here. I'm trying to get rid of it. It's not working too well right now, so I know I have to go back later on. But in order to break this up, I need to go in there and change the geometry. I don't want to do that right now, so I leave that for the next step. And sometimes I just cover entire areas with the painting and to texture it, which works in this case quite well. Adds a nice bit of highlights on these pillars in the background, and adds nice variation in there as well. So I'm trying to use this texture of the rock avalanche again to bring in rocks now on the bridge part that is in direct sunlight. So now of course I need to adjust the grading to that as well. And again, I'm using a brush with a bit of scatter dynamics to randomly place rocks here and there, but in the end it's a lot of use of the standard round brush and the chalk brush to get them into place. And of course also what helps to get the illusion that the elements are sitting in the scene is to bring elements on top of it again. So in this case, the railing makes it look that is actually part of the surface of this bridge. And I'm gonna bring the ivy back over it again as well. So I'm just painting a few, the integration there, and where I don't like it, I erase it and try to make it as natural as possible, in fact. And it also helps to keep this stuff on a separate layer and switch it on and off to see what your progression is, because you don't want to go back and see, oh well, it looked better before I touched it. So always try to improve in an area, obviously. And I'm painting in some highlights, which is really, really helpful. So you want to bring in the pictures because they bring in the photorealistic texture, but then you want to definitely start the painting to bring in the texture, to embed them into the scene and make the values work and all this stuff. So in order to paint this integration here, I thought it might be a nice idea to break up the one side of the road, because the whole idea is it's a destroyed environment. It's a really like a battle took place there 100 years ago or something like that. So I thought it's a nice idea to make a big gap in this bridge without drawing too much attention on it. So with a lasso tool, I modified the outline, and now just with a standard chalk brush, I'm painting in some details and shadows to make it look natural. And this kind of work is actually the fun part of this process, because you don't need to think too much about, is everything in place? Is the composition working? Is the lighting working? It is already there because you started in 3D. Also placing a few extra weaponry, and of course looking at some reference images, which is really, really helpful as well. And I had this idea of adding a bit of a brick texture to this to the foreground pillar, because right now they are just raw rock, and it's quite hard to understand how this stuff is built, and also to add scale. So my idea is to add some brick structure that they are actually made out of individual bricks, and then they might progress into to the bottom and to the ceiling. They are going over into natural rock. So they were carved out of the rock to a certain point, and then they put bricks in between to get the desired construction support or ceiling support. And this will bring, also a sense of scale, because in fact what you're going to tell is the pillar in the foreground is the same pillar as the pillars in the background. So when you mirror this kind of element in the scene, it will add scale and perspective to the scenery, and the bricks will give it, it will support this idea, of course. Again, using simple dirt textures to break up the perfect railing there. I still feel that the foreground road is a bit, too clean, so it's always nice to add these dirt trails here. And it's so convenient with the render mask to bring the ivy back on top, and it, integrates these textures so seamlessly into the environment. And it's also good to, just selectively. Again, here there's this really bright arc, and it's good to just add some dirt selectively in that area, because if you see it at in one area, you will think it's everywhere. So I found this nice image of an entire cliff mountain, and I thought it's a good idea to increase the look of that, or work on the look of this background wall, because it has this very CG looking edge in this wall, which I think will look nice in the renderer, but now it's way too sharp, way too clean. So I'm painting a bit on top of it to blend it. And again, there's a lot of haze on top of that stuff, so I'm trying to make it as invisible as possible. And while I'm in that area, I'm also adding a few paint details to the gate area as well. I'm also darkening a few areas here and there, and but I'm still in the texture phase, so I wanna definitely focus on the increasing the photorealism in this stage instead of the overall look of the image. If you wanna think about it like that, it's more like a transition phase from 3D to 2D, although of course this entire process is 2D work. And you always have to think about the story, right? You all the changes you do, all the texture detail you apply, you have to think about the big story. What happened there? What fitted in here? And again, now I'm adding this cliff rock structure to the bottom of this pillar because I thought, okay, it's as I said before, these pillars might be carved out of the rock, and then just in between they put some bricks. You have to make up some kind of a story in order to make this environment believable, to make this environment understand. And even though you don't get it when you look at the image, you will somehow feel that it's believable because somebody thought about this, all these elements, which helps a lot, obviously, in the final painting, because the purpose of this piece is you want to make somebody look at this thing and say, oh yeah, I like that place, I want to be there, I want to discover it. That's something I want to see. And so I make sure everything is color-wise, is value-wise, matches the render. And now I'm adding a bit more haze in between the foreground and the midground, again, to separate these elements and to support the composition. I don't go too crazy on it. We can always do this later on, but it's definitely helpful to do that. Again, I'm using the same rock avalanche element again here, trying to cover the bridge in this area as well. And it's the same thing, you throw it in there, you apply a layer mask, and then you erase with black and white where you wanna remove rocks and where you wanna get them in, and then I do my color correction on the entire image and remove or change the image where I wanna do that. And but by adding this rock piece in this rock image in this area, I lost a nice shadow of the railing on the ground, and I really don't want to do that. So in order to bring that back, I brought back one of my render layers, which is the raw lighting, and my lighting path actually has just as information as a black and white, so I can just use this as a mask and a curve adjustment, and it will put it on top, and we'll get this really nice shadow on the rocks, so which will make them look even more integrated. And again, to support that, I'm also removing now the shadows, the highlights, because it's supposed to be in the shadow, right? And this kind of integration painting is really the key, and which makes it matte painting techniques in disguise, because you have the photographic detail, but you really need to integrate that into the scenery. So it's a lot of sampling the colors, understanding how light reacts, and as I said, the CG rendering gives us the base, so we only need to match that and make sure the colors are really matching. And obviously elements like haze should be kept separate, because we might change later on the intensity of this haze layer. So make this a separate layer, definitely, because you never know when you need to adjust something underneath, and then you have 2 layers of haze on top of it that you already merged to your master layer, and then you're stuck. So keep haze and atmospheric effects always separate. That's a good rule to work with. Obviously, we already baked the atmosphere of the light into our renderer, but that's what we did on purpose. And if we have to change something like that, we always have it separate anyway, because as you might remember, we rendered via atmospheric pass as well. Just cycling through my dirt stuff, still found one face that looks really clean, so I wanna adjust that. And finally starts to get together and starts losing the photorealistic feeling. And as you might notice, for haze adjustments, I really zoom out and make the image small. And in my layout, I always have the navigator on the top right anyway to see the image and see the effect on the entire image. Even though we are in this super detailed process right now, you want to make sure you get you don't want to lose some of the composition and light direction you already have. So I want to add a few more lenses in my scene, and the best way to do this is I thought, I'm just gonna create a custom brush, and so I took an image from a lens and crushed the contrast and get basically a black and white version out of that one. And then I defined a new brush set, and then I just do a blank new canvas and access my brush properties. And what I want to do is I want to give it a kind of a random scaling and a random angle jitter, and adjust the distance between the individual brush strokes. And this gives me a nice random brush, which I can use for detailing my entire scene. So I don't have to paste individual lenses, from images. I can only use my brush here. And the cool thing is, because of our pretty much texture-free environment, we don't need to apply a lot of texture later on anyway. We can get away with a lot of color, simple color, painted color in general as well. Applying a few highlights here and there, and now I'm gonna use my my new brush. Just trying to sample one color, make it really obvious, and paint them into place. And you always want to think about, where can I see these objects? Make them bright in front of a dark background. Make them dark in front of a bright background, so they really are really visible and they play out. And then we just duplicate the layer and offset it by a pixel, so we get a nice rim light on one side, and obviously matching the light direction. So on this foreground shadow area, obviously this was not matching, so I need to adjust that, because I transformed the entire layer. And I'm also changing the shapes here and there just to break it up and make it a bit more random, because you don't want to have them all the same. Some are supposed to be broken, some are a bit sharper, and some of them I'm going to use as a pole for a flag. So I found this, image of a flag. I like the shape, I do not like the color, so I thought, I just might gonna use it like that. But before, I'm gonna apply some highlights to indicate that the tip of the lenses are made out of metal. So quickly gonna paint those highlights in there, and it will make them look alive. The little highlight adds much more interest to them, and actually we can read them better as well. Obviously, we don't need to do that on the foreground too much. Also cleaning up a few edges from the haze. Again, you don't want to have them. So I want to have the haze baked in. So what I do now is I put the haze on top of my new lens paintings. So I put it in my flag and I change the color, and obviously we have kind of a greenish bluish environment. So obviously I choose red to get the maximum color contrast to contrast the green. And I'm quickly duplicating it, rewarping it, and by sampling the color, painting it in a different shape. And it works quite well, even though it's just painted, it adds some nice visual interest. And with the line tool, I'm just, painting a small little banner. And again, duplicating the layer, brighten it up, offsetting it for 1 pixel to get a highlight on one side. And then I'm gonna paint in the mask again by just sampling the same color we used for the other brush for the other flag from the brush, and as trying to shade it as believable as possible. So this was it, the second part of this tutorial. I hope you had fun and you enjoyed it, and if you liked it, please stop by for part 3, and thank you very much for your attention. Goodbye.